All right, good evening again, everyone. So before I start this evening session, I'm going to quickly go through your first assessment that is due on the 14th of June. So I'll just spend a couple minutes going through it so that you know what is expected of you. After the class, I will post the outline along with the rubric to Moodle so that you guys will be able to see it there. So I'm putting good. So the instruction, this is the general instructions for the paper. It says, develop a position paper on educating students with visual impairments to be used with school administrators, families, teachers, education officers, and other education professionals. Please double check your microphones for me, please, because somebody's unmuted. In your paper, include the following: a brief history of the education of children who are blind or low vision. Make reference to the legislations that govern the education of children who are blind or low vision. Identify at least 3 strategies for accommodating a child who's blind or low vision in a general education classroom. Position paper should not be less than 3 pages, not inclusive of cover and reference page. So that is from introduction to conclusion, should be no less than 3 pages, right? Now, what this is asking is you are writing a paper for people in the education sector who have no idea about children who are visually impaired or working with children who are visually impaired, right? So you are basically writing this paper to inform them of, you do a brief history of educating children who are blind. Now, you could do it one of 2 ways. You could do it by looking at it in the US and then you kind of move to Guyana, or you could do it the Caribbean region as a whole and then you narrow to Guyana, right? If it is not posted, I'm going to post, there's a document that outlines the history of education for the blind in Guyana. So I will also post that to the Moodle so that you'll be able to get that. All right, here, and after giving the history, you talk about the various legislations that govern the education of children with visual impairments. You can do this the same way. You could talk a little bit about IDEA. In the United States, there's something called a national agenda. You can look that up as well. And coming to Guyana, since we don't have a published special education needs policy, you can look to the Guyana Persons with Disabilities Act under the section of education, right? Now, I'm not asking you to copy and paste, because if I want to read the legislation, I could just go and read the legislation. I don't want to read the legislation in your assignment, right? Summarize what it's saying or summarize the points that you're trying to make, right, from the legislation. Don't go and copy a whole page out of the act, because I don't want to have to read the act in your assignment. I know what the act says, right? If you would also like to reference other legislations like the Education Act, go right ahead. You can reference those pieces of legislations, right? Relevant legislations. Identifying 3 strategies for accommodating a child who's blind or low vision in a general education classroom. Now, chances are 20 people will come with the same thing because they all went to ChatGPT and type it in and it generated 3 strategies, right? If that is what you choose to do, because obviously I cannot physically stop you from doing that. If that is what you do, I am asking that you just use, if it gives you an idea that you think you can use it and then contextualize it, right? For example, if it says something like using Braille and large print in the classroom can help to whatever accommodate the child, something like that. That is a very broad and vague statement. I need you to apply it to Guyana. How would that work here? Right? So I need you to contextualize it to Guyana. Right? Now, for the general structure of your paper, you must have an introduction and a conclusion. And you must label it, right? Label it with your headings. And of course, you have your reference page. I went through the references. I gave you resources. So I do not expect that people will come with something like access notes on Moodle as a reference, right? Also, your in-text citations, whichever names you have in your in-text citations, it must be present on your reference page. Good. So let me go through the rubric very quickly for you so you'll know how I'm marking. Just give me one minute. So it's going for 20 marks, right? So for content, 10 marks will be allotted for content. Content includes inclusion of brief history of education of children with visual impairments, reference to relevant legislation, and discussion of 3 effective strategies, right? So this whole section, the content itself goes for 10 marks. So the brief history goes for 2 marks. Reference to the relevant legislation goes for 2 marks. And the 3 strategies, that will go for 6 marks. Clarity and organization, this goes for 6 points or 6 marks. Clear and logical organization of ideas, insightful analysis of opportunities and challenges, thoughtful exploration of solutions and best practices. And each of those will go for 2 marks, right? Overall presentation goes for 4 points or marks. Introduction and conclusion, grammar, language, use of references. And that goes for 4 marks, right? So even though some of the sections go for only two marks, it doesn't mean that you'll only write 1 paragraph, right? So please express yourself adequately. That's what I can tell you. Try your best to explain, because remember, these are people who don't know about educating or working with a child who's blind. They don't believe a child who's blind should be in a regular classroom. So you're trying to educate them and sensitize them on how it is done, how it can be done, and the different legislations that are governing the education of children who are blind. Okay, I'll open now for any questions quickly.
Good evening, Miss Jamila Simpson here again. Question. You had mentioned like looking at other countries, either the Caribbean or the US. Is it
Mhm.
that you would like us to also do our own survey and make comparison of, if I'm to write about, say for instance, if I'm to write about Jamaica, right, and in relation to Jamaica and Guyana, if I'm to do comparison and look at their survey and our survey on the visually
You're
impaired.
saying survey. I'm not sure if we are thinking about the same thing. When you say survey, what do you mean?
I'm not hearing anything. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not hearing anything.
Leave the meeting and rejoin.
I don't think she got to hear that.
I was just
Things are
about to
fluctuating.
type it in the chat.
And someone said there's an in another class.
Somebody just type in the chat to tell her leave and rejoin, please. Yes. When you say survey, what do you mean?
Um, we all right, like we had an article was written by we had an article that we had to read, right? But this was based on disability, how disability is being treated in the classroom and
Hmm.
at a primary level. So I'm saying for the brief history you mentioned, if we were to write about America and then we go over to Guyana, saying about who are blind or low vision, right? So my question is like, if we to have like a marginalized something or a percentage based on America and Guyana, like something like that. You understand what I'm saying, Miss?
I'm really trying to, but I'm not sure. Because, okay,
Alright.
so here's why I'm confused, right? Because, okay, so a survey means that you do a questionnaire, you send it out, people complete the questionnaire, then you analyze the data. That's what survey means. So I'm not sure if that's what
I
you're
probably
thinking of, or maybe you're thinking of like, right, that's why I'm kind of confused. Um, okay,
like
so let me,
using a database something, Miss. Like having a database something mean like you're going to compare it. Like America have
you mean
more low vision than Guyana.
statistics?
Yeah,
You mean
statistics. Yeah, that's the word. That's the
statistics
word.
wise? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Statistic. It's up to you, to be honest. So this is what I would imagine, well, I would want your papers to look like. That if you look at the US, right? If you go and you look and you find some research papers or articles about how education for the blind started in the US, um, just maybe 2 paragraphs summarizing that to say, well, in 19 Just for example, right? Like in 1933, a school for the blind opened and it saw, 100 children being educated. And during the 1960s, children were eventually integrated into the mainstream schools. Just like contextual information. And then you could go on to say, in Guyana, right? Education for the blind did not start until the 1980s when a classroom for the blind was set up at the David Rose Special School, things like that. So like that's what I want you. You don't necessarily have to put statistical information, but if it is that you want to do it, to say, well, maybe 50% of children who are blind attend mainstream schools in the US, if it is relevant to the point that you're making, then go ahead and do that, right? But if it is not relevant, then you don't have to.
Okay, miss. And the
Yeah.
part with the referencing of the legislation, I don't know if the idea would be okay with you, but I was thinking when we same if we're talking about America, right? Because if you're going to make it mention in the history, I think you should make the same comparison when it comes to the legislation. That's what I'm thinking. It should be.
Well, I'm saying, well, that's what I initially said, that you can use IDEA, which is an American piece of legislation, um, and you also have, but you're using it because we generally use it. So you use that, but then you also narrow it down to Guyana, and maybe if you want to talk about another Caribbean country just as a comparison, like, Jamaica has their um Disability Act, Antigua and Barbuda has one. So you can look those up just to show a comparison, that, because remember, again, the purpose of the paper is to educate people who don't know, right? So you could say that, in these countries, we have this legislation. In Guyana, we have this legislation, and it says that, no child shall be discriminated on the basis of a disability, something like that. Because you're letting them know that provisions are made in the laws of the country, right?
Okay, miss. Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Hi, Miss. Good evening. I don't have a question, but I have a query. I would like to know if this information will be placed on the platform because I'm looking at your course right now and there still isn't much there.
All right, so that's for the entire duration of the course? Or are you talking about like weeks 1 to 3?
Miss, there's only information for week one. There's nothing from week
Mhm,
two onwards. And I would
mhm.
like for the information concerning the assignment to be placed on the platform because personally, I like to go and read as I go along.
All right, well, perhaps you joined a bit late, but I had said that when we finish with the class, I will ensure that the rubric and the instructions and some additional resources like the history of blind education in Guyana is there on Moodle so that you guys could have access to it, right?
Okay,
So
Miss, thank you.
yeah, I'll put it there when the class is finished. Now, I'm not sure why the weeks are not opening. I will have to reach out and see what's going on. Because if we log in on our end, we're seeing all the materials there. So that's why I think it's maybe something technical. So I'll see if CPC could deal with that. All right. But in the meantime, I will continue to send through WhatsApp. I sent some this evening's notes through WhatsApp this afternoon. So you guys should be receiving that. If you haven't already, you should be receiving that in your WhatsApp groups, right? So I'll also be sharing there as well. So nothing that is relevant you would miss, because I will also be sending it through WhatsApp. Okay, well,